different times, provided us with a real picture of what was happening in Iran before you left. But before I discuss some of the points that were here presented, I want to, if Victoria allows me, I want to mention that something that came up in the last panel that is not unrelated to this panel. David Cameron spoke of invisibility of Iranian community and that as one of the reasons that our battle against violation of human rights in Iran are not as widespread or as effective as they should be. I think he had a point, but at the same time, from one viewpoint, it's not a very accurate account of the Iranian community's activities. After all, we are petitioning, we are demonstrating, we are appealing to the Canadian governments and politicians to do something about the situation in Iran. And let's not forget that Iranians have also entered the formal politics. After all, we have two members of parliament, one in Ontario and one in Quebec, Reza Moridi and Amir Khadid. So we are not as visible as you might think. However, I want to say that in one aspect you are right, and that is that perhaps the level of outrage that should be shown by our community against specific forms of violations of human rights in Iran really don't match what is happening in Iran and the level of struggle that requires. I'm specifically referring to the number of executions in Iran, particularly in the last while. After all, in the last month alone, 40 people have been executed in Iran, 5 only last week. This requires an enormous campaign for bringing it to the attention of the world, to the Canadian government, which we heard that has actually not a very bad relationship with Iran. It is very careful as to what it does. So definitely it alerts us, this criticism alerts us to the fact that we have to be much more active. We might have to show much stronger outrage about what is happening in Iran and the lives of so many young people that are being lost. This is not unrelated because many of the executions actually are women. And this brings me back to what Azadeh Kian said about the new phenomenon that has arisen in Iran, and that is martyrdom of women. And I want also to correct this misconception that women have been actually part of the martyrs in Iran. During the Shah's period, many women lost their lives in guerrilla movements, because you said this is a new phenomenon. Many women were part of the guerrilla movement, Fedayeen and Mujahideen and other organizations. They lost their lives, they were executed, they killed in the battle, and not to forget the killings of the 1988, Kushtar 67, that thousands of young women, some of them teenagers, were massacred by the Iranian regime. So martyrdom is not actually a new phenomenon, martyrdom of women. But let me focus, I apologize for mentioning these because these are very crucial issues for the Iranian community. Starting from Mehranghize Kar, she presented to us a background, basically, a broader context for the women's participation in the election and in post-election protest movement that basically mesmerized the whole world. And she is absolutely right that there is a broader context. There is a history why women acted the way they did. And that is all the struggles that started immediately after the revolution starting with the protests of women against Khomeini's order that women should cover up, because women were the emblem of the Islamic State's identity. And these protests were extremely important because it was unorganized. It was not something that the political organizations, left or right, were mobilizing. It was spontaneous, and it was the first, actually, protest, open protest to Khomeini's authority that up to that point actually enjoyed a sacrosanct position, and no one could question it. So it is very important. But why women have been active, there are two major reasons. Given the courageous acts of women, it is for granted. But however, we should also have in mind the level of atrocities that committed, that Mehrangiz mentioned some of them, the discriminatory policies that immediately, almost immediately after the revolution started. It was, this protest against hijab happened only 3 weeks after the revolution, on the eve of International Women's Rights. Both Kian and Ms. Carr actually mentioned the importance of women's subversion against the Islamic government. And I think it is very important. Both of you related to the fact of resistance of young women against hijab. And I think sometimes, you know, there is a misconception about why hijab is so important to women. And sometimes it is not appreciated that resisting or resistance against hijab is extremely important, because through this resistance, women are actually claiming or reclaiming the control of their bodies. So they refuse to actually give this control to someone else. Some time ago, actually, someone compared this resistance against hijab to something that was very prevalent, a form of resistance of slaves in the United States against the slave owners, that is called dandyism. And this is that the female slaves actually painted their bodies, naked bodies. And this was forms of resistance. More and more it is being argued that this was a form of resistance against the slave owners and their abuse and misuse of and violent actually takeover of female body. So this is a very important form of resistance by the young Iranian woman.